Dear friends, welcome. And in this video, we'll be talking about the cognitive model of psychopathology. Before discussing about the cognitive model, let us understand what is psychopathology. The science that studies and diagnoses the mental disorders is known as the psychopathology. Now, what is the central theme of cognitive model? Because each model is based upon a theme around which everything rotates. So what is the central theme here? The distortion in cognition leads to the mental disorders. This is the prime statement or the sentence that explain everything about the cognitive model of psychopathology. Now, let us focus upon some important dysfunctional cognitive aspects, or we can call it as the cognitive complications that occurs in a human being that leads to the mental disorders or the abnormality. Irrational and inaccurate assumptions about self. When individuals start assuming something which cannot be explained with the logic or the rational thoughts, there is some kind of distortion or disturbance in the attitude about self. I cannot remember. My memory is weak. I cannot perceive the things correctly. So what are these? These are the inaccurate or the faulty assumptions and attitude towards the self. And these all things reflect in the individual's behavior. An individual starts behaving that way. And that is an indicator of abnormality. Thinking illogically, repeatedly. That means the thought process is purely illogical, the intensity is higher, and the frequency is high. Making or generalization. What does it mean? Means if something occurs here, the individual start believing that same thing is going to occur there also. So that is overgeneralization, and it directly reflected by the behavior. Then making inappropriate, exaggerated, and negative inferences from a trivial or insignificant events. If something occurs somewhere which has almost no bearing on human life, the individual with the cognitive complications start making the broad, big, exaggerated, and negative conclusions from that event. Individual when have his or her thinking limited to the two options, that is either all or none. The people with the cognitive distortions believe in one thing, that is everything they say is correct, whatever other one is saying is incorrect, all or nothing. Then individuals start experiencing physiological sensations. And remember, without any stimulation, that's indicator of cognitive complication. Means there is no external or internal stimulation till individual have the experiences of bodily sensation. Magnification and minimization. What does it mean? Magnification of small events and careless attitude or behavior about the significant events. That's a minimization. selective abstraction. You know the abstraction? We make the inferences, conclusions, or the concepts in our mind. We assume many things, and that's the way we work. But our abstraction is not selective one. Whereas the individual or the person who's suffering from this some kind of cognitive complications are likely to indulge in selective abstraction, overgeneralization, and misattribution. We have discussed the overgeneralization, but the misattribution means attributing the cause of some event to some other person or the object or some supernatural power. That is misattribution. Personalization and emotion-based decision making, reasoning, or discussion. It means when a person starts making a decision based on the emotions instead of the facts and the figures, it can be assumed that there is some kind of presence of abnormality in that particular person. Catastrophization, making a mountain out of a mole, means making big claims or generalization from the trivial or insignificant events. And finally, improper labeling. Labeling the individual, labeling the objects, labeling the some markets, the school, the colleges. They start labeling them inappropriately. Remember this. So dear friends, these are some cognitive complications by and large indicate the presence of abnormality. What are the key principles of this model? Vulnerability towards the psychological dysfunction occurs due to core schemas, the beliefs, assumptions, and automatic thought process. Now let us throw some light on the insights from the cognitive model. This model says that the perceptions and the consequent reaction or the responses indicates the mental or the psychological health of that particular person. That means how we perceive things and how we respond to that things. Both are phenomena. Our perception as well as our response to that perception is an indicator of mental health. Why it is so important? Our response pattern to the internal as well as the external stimuli significantly influences our life. Just as Hans Selye once said that it's not the stress that kills us, it's the response to the stress that kills us. So, responses are the very good indicators and influences our life. Because if we are not able to perceive the things correctly, that is, if our perception is distorted or the faulty, it directly influences our thought process, our response pattern, and finally our behavior. So perception has to be appropriate one to have a appropriate behavior, and our faulty perception or the inappropriate behavior has direct link with expression and the feeling of emotions. If our expressions of emotion is inappropriate one, experience is also inappropriate one, then this can be taken as the root cause of abnormality. This model particularly works on information processing approach, just as your computer system works. That is, the information is received and is processed, and finally it is expressed through our behavioral manifestation. So it has been found that individuals who have the faulty or the rigid thought process or thinking style that directly interferes with the processing of information, because the information processing is dependent upon your past experiences, your perception, your memories, your attitude, your observational style, different aspects. So it directly interferes with the information processing, and if information is not processed appropriately, then the outcome will be distorted one. How can we expect where perfect information from inappropriate processing? It cannot be. Certainly the output will be distorted one. And if the outcome is not appropriate, it directly influences the behavior. So behavior will also not be appropriate. One more thing, the person with the rigid thinking style or conservative type of mindset, when they are exposed to stressful situation, challenging situation, or negative events, they find it difficult to cope with them, because they are prone to or tend to think in a particular way only. That means the information received from that event is processed in a particular specific way, and that may or may not give the desired results. Certainly they land up in a soup. This is our cognitive model. Just you can go through it. So let me read it for you. The childhood experiences, then these experiences forms our core beliefs and schemas. From that schemas, we form our assumptions, and they all stay for a longer period of time in our memory. So when there is any external trigger or the stimulation, these assumptions, beliefs, and core schemas interfere with the information from that stimulation and leads to the negative automatic thought process. And this negative automatic thought process again plays with the perception, and this vicious cycle keeps on moving. And from that, this all negative thought process, distorted perceptual ability, your disturbed state of mood is expressed through our behavior, and that behavior will be inappropriate. The consequences of that behavior will be abnormal, and through that behavior, individual get some feedback, and this vicious cycle goes on. Now let us explain the cognitive model. Childhood experiences. You know, the childhood period is a very important part of life, where a child learns lots of things. So these experiences are very important. If these experiences are inappropriate, take my point, they forms the lasting impression. Schemas are a kind of cognitive map where they forms a structure of the experiences. Based upon that, individual explains various natural or the man-made phenomena. Once our childhood experiences are not appropriate one, so they lead to formation of faulty or inappropriate schemas. So these schemas in turn influences our perceptual ability. And if a perception is distorted one, inappropriate, inaccurate, certainly the information from that perception comes will be inappropriate one. Inappropriate information will be then processed and the outcome will also be inappropriate. If outcome is inappropriate, the behavior cannot be appropriate. The individual with the distorted perceptual ability or the inappropriate schemas find it difficult to cope up with the challenging situations, stressful events, or they make lots of error in the decision making and they find it difficult to solve the problems. Then comes the core beliefs. The word core is important here. You know, the core of the earth, the seed of an apple resides in its core. So nature has made such a thing that the seed is the most important part which has to be protected from everything, so that the seed is just placed in the innermost core of the fruit. Almost all except few. Similarly, the belief system individual holds about himself, about society, about the world are the core belief system. If this core belief system is a negative one, inappropriate one, then the schemas will become inappropriate, because in the center of schemas these core beliefs lie. In the event of distorted core beliefs, everything that comes out from that seed will be distorted one, inappropriate one. Then assumptions. These are conditional propositions, means the propositions that have some kind of conditions. If then statement. If this happens, then I will do that. This is called as the propositions or the conditional propositions. And these have direct bearing on the individual's everyday life and behavior. Rules of living also comes under the assumptions. What will be the rules and regulations under which I should live my life? These are also assumptions. They are not the facts. Though the rules may be based upon some facts, but rules of living are assumptions only. And they may vary from one individual to another. One more psychological aspect, that is attitude. That also comes under the domain of assumptions. How we look towards thing is derived by our attitude towards that particular object or the event. You know, the maladaptive assumptions tend to focus on three aspects, that is acceptance, competence, and the control. This indicates that if the acceptance is faulty and the perceptual ability, information processing, memory formation, this comes under the competence. If this competence is also faulty, certainly the control over the automatic thought process and cognitive ability will be poorer, and that may lead to the abnormality. Now there is a small table in front of you, the themes of core beliefs and their psychological disorders. Let us read one by one. If there is a depression, what will be the core belief of the individual who is suffering from the depression is negative self-evaluation, hopelessness, failure, deprivation, helplessness. Then GAD, generalized anxiety disorders, means the individual who suffers from GAD is likely to have these core beliefs. That is the worry, need to self-sacrifice, unrelenting standards. Then comes your panic disorders, fear of medical catastrophe or a mental health catastrophe. Then comes the social phobia, fear of being rejected, criticized or humiliated. Then OCD, fear of losing mental or the behavioral control that leads to the harm to self and others. Then the BPD, bipolar disorders, believes that undermine medication compliance, manic and depressive beliefs regularly. Then anorexia nervosa, impaired autonomy, impaired limits or control. Then suicidal ideation and intent, shame, isolation, alienation, failure, and defectiveness. So these are the some psychological disorders, and these are the relating core beliefs. Then in cognitive model there is a trigger. What is trigger? The external environmental stimuli or the internal stimuli also that initiate a chain of reaction of thought process in the individual. Negative automatic thoughts. Most important feature of negative thoughts is they are involuntary, they are uncontrollable, they are comprehensive, and they have the meticulous planning. That is, a person do not have any control over these negative automatic thoughts. That's why they are named as automatic. But they are not general thoughts. They are specific or particular to an event. So what is their role? First, they deplete the cognitive energy significantly, and they directly influences the behavior of the person who is undergoing these automatic thought process. So this was all about the cognitive model of psychopathology. These are my references. If you want to know more, you can refer this. If you like the contents and the presentation style of this video, share with others. But if any question, any query or any suggestion to make, you can connect me through various social media handles such as this Twitter, Koo, LinkedIn, SlideShare, Reddit, Tumblr, YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram. Or you can directly write a comment in my comment box. Or you can email me at vomasujit@yahoo.com. And dear friends, do not forget to watch my next video on the classification of psychopathology.